Scientists know a lot about how animals move through
This
the
is
air,
Rex,
through
a
water,
six-legged robot developed by a team of scientists, including Daniel Skoda.
You don't have a deep understanding of the principles by which matter
That's what's happening at a lab in Atlanta, Georgia.
inspiration to create organisms like biologists.
Hi, I'm Professor Dan Goldman in the School of Physics at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Our lab is called the CRAB Lab. It stands for Complex Rheology and Biomechanics. And the CRAB Lab is the result of research that I and my students do in trying to understand how animals and models of animals, robots, run around in sand. And it turns out that when I was in 7th grade, I was very interested in lizards. Particularly lizards that jumped and climbed in trees. And as I moved on in my scientific career, I decided that I was more interested in how sand and materials like sand flowed. And it turned out that I later came back to wanting to understand how organisms move. And in our lab, we now combine my two interests as a kid, animals running around and flowing sand. And that's what we do.
Hi, my name is Nicole. I'm a biology graduate student, and I work on sea turtle locomotion. I'm interested not in how sea turtles swim, I'm interested in how they walk on sand. The reason I'm interested in this is because sand is interesting. It can either be a solid or a fluid, so you can either step on it and slip, or you can walk on it. But what I'm fascinated is how can an animal that has flippers and is an excellent swimmer cope with an environment that it has to go to? So I went out in the field and I took video of actual sea turtles on the beach, and I've noticed that any small obstacle, even a little twig, is really hard for them to run over. These animals are very small, maybe about 3 inches, and they have to run about 200 to 300 yards down into the ocean, and they have to do it successfully for the whole species to survive. What was most fascinating about my research is that I found out that when these sea turtles run on hard ground or on sand, they run at the same speed. I had predicted that when they run on sand, they would be slipping, it would be slower. What I've realized is the technique is in how they use their flipper with the ground. So when they put their flipper onto soft sand, they will dig in and move what is essentially their wrist, creating a little solid block behind their flipper and moving their body forward. On the hard ground, they will put their flipper down and rotate around the nail that's sticking out of their flipper and still be able to move forward. This was very fascinating, but when I had further questions about what's the maximum speed these animals can achieve, I went into the limitations of my experiment. I cannot tell an animal to run faster or slower, so this is where going into a physics lab and getting ideas from physicists really helped me out. What they suggested to me is make a physical model, like a robot, that can incorporate the movements of sea turtles, but I can test it to all the limits. So we've built a sea turtle robot, which is called FlipperBot, and it has features from the sea turtles. So it has these flippers, and it can have a wrist, or I can take the wrist away. And so I can run and test my different hypotheses, which is very exciting. There you go. So my research incorporates the biology as well as the physics, which I think is a novel way of looking at some of these problems, but it's very interesting because I can answer a question that nobody else could before. This is some of the benefits of being a researcher, is that you can ask these questions, you can find new techniques to do it.
So my name is Chen, and I'm a physics PhD student working in this lab. My research focused on understanding the principles of legged locomotion on granular media. And here is a fluidized bed trackway which I built. So this is one of the main techniques that we use in our lab to control granular media. So I'll show you how it works. So what you just see is we blow a large flow of air upward through the granular media to fluidize it, and And after we turn off the air, the granular media settles to a loosely packed state. And then we can send air pulses or vibrations to compact it to close packed state. So with this apparatus, we can precisely and repeatably control the compaction of granular media. And that gives us a good model substrate for doing locomotion studies on granular media.
So my name is Sarah Sharp. I am a bioengineering graduate student here at Georgia Tech. And I primarily work with the sandfish lizard. It is a lizard native to the Saharan desert. What's cool about it is it just doesn't walk on the surface like most lizards. It actually buries in the sand, and it can swim underneath the sand, similar to an eel swimming in water. It undulates its body to move in granular material. Right now we're using this robot. So it has a 6 motor, 7 segments, and it has another motor actually on the head that allows it to tilt. So here it is. So we can control the head angle. And we think that's really important for these undulatory movers in granular media to be able to enter into the material and to be able to exit the material. So I'll show how it works. Basically, we have it form this 1 period wavelength, and that's similar to what the animal actually does. And then we can undulate and control the frequency that it undulates at, and we can control the amplitude of that wave along its body. So I'll run it now. It's undulating, and we can actually bury it, and we can still see how the animal is moving using these tracking balls. And it's actually exiting the material right now because of that head angle that it has. So it's lifting. So again, we think that that head angle is really important to determine lift in this granular media. Previously, people thought it had to do with reducing drag, but we think it's not only this wedge shape to reduce drag in the animal, but also to kind of control if it's moving up or down. So another thing we found about this particular robot is we found it moves about the fastest when it's a particular waveform. So basically when it's this sort of shape, it moves really fast. If we elongate the body and have sort of a longer wavelength, is what we call it, it moves slower. And if it's very squished together like this, it also moves very slow. So there is an optimal wave length and wave amplitude for this robot. And we went into the animal, and in fact that's the wavelength and wave amplitude that the animal actually uses. So the animal basically uses the wave form that is most efficient for moving the fastest through granular media. So basically we use this robot to test principles to come up with like hypotheses, and then we look at the animal and we can verify whether those hypotheses are true. Is it using this particular waveform to escape the fastest? I like to do research because it's basically there's a lot of questions that are thrown at us that do not have specific answers. So in school you're dealing with questions that you know there's an answer to, so you can go look it up. Somebody else has done it before. But with research, nobody else has done this science before. And so we are developing the science that potentially will go into textbooks. And you really have to use your reasoning skills, what you already know, to try to figure out and test, basically come up with models to figure out these new principles, these new rules that nobody has figured out before. So that's why I like to do research. It's really challenging and really exciting when you figure out something that nobody else knows, basically.
Okay, we at the Crab Lab thank you for your interest in our lab, and we hope that one day you can come and help us explore the mysteries of animals and robots running around in sand and other interesting materials.